Mr. Whittlesey is the Councillor for Environment, Science, Technology and Health, the US Embassy in London. Previously he has served in Amman, Jordan, and in Beijing and Guangzhou in China, as well as Jamaica and Greece. He's here today to speak and to answer questions about the environment or technology, and I'll let him go from there. So, before we start, quickly a couple of quick announcements. Tomorrow at 7 p.m. we have Nicole Stevens, leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, speaking in the TVA dining room. And a week from tomorrow, November 6th, we'll have Lord Anthony Giddens, the British sociologist, speaking at 7 p.m. on Gordon Brown and his impact on the world. That will be in the Old College Lecture Theatre 175. So, without further ado, Mr. Whittlesey.
Before I start, I know that you may have commitments at some point that come up, so if you need to leave, feel free to do so with my support. I understand you have other issues that may affect your schedule. As Dante said, I'm a Foreign Service officer, a diplomat, been working overseas for the last 15 years. What that means, though, is that I am a generalist, which means I'm not an environmental engineer, I'm not an attaché from EPA, I'm a State Department Foreign Service officer, a diplomat, and my job is simply to apply traditional diplomatic tools and goals to environmental issues. I also cover science and technology and health. And I've just gotten to London. I arrived at the end of August. I'll be here for a 3-year assignment with my wife and son, who are visiting Edinburgh with me. Here it seems a little less necessary to say that I've got my family with me, but in other places people seem to be surprised to find out that we often travel with our wives and children. I think it's a great experience for them to have a chance to live in other cultures and not read about things in the newspaper and on TV, but to live them up close. So we've taken advantage of the opportunity of being in London to come up to Edinburgh. I gotta say, I am very happy to be here in Edinburgh because for 50 years I've been having to explain to people what the name Jock means, and I'm finally in a place where that is no longer necessary. So. My name comes from an uncle of mine who is from Edinburgh, who emigrated to Canada and married my father's sister there. So I think I'm one of the few Americans with the name Jock, but I feel a little bit of a sense of homecoming here with my Scottish name. I'd like to just quickly ask a couple of questions of the folks in the audience so I can get a sense of who's out here. Are you mostly sort of, first of all, is everybody here a student, or do we have some staff as well? What do you do, sir?
What do I do? I run a circus club here in town.
Okay.
But I was a member of the Politics Society in the past, and I'm still on their email list. Okay, great, welcome.
Everybody else students? Okay. What are you on the staff here? Or? Okay. In politicals? I know politics. Of the students, also studying political science or international affairs? Okay, good. I thought what I'm going to do is just give you a couple of, speak for a few minutes, and then I'd like to make it a little bit more of a conversation and take your questions and have a discussion. I thought rather than list all of the environmental agreements that we're party to and tell you about this program or that program that we do to conserve wildlife and protect the environment, which I think would be rather dull, important, but still dull. I thought what I'd do is take a few minutes and talk about some of the aspects of politics in the United States and how they interact with our environmental policies, because I think this gives you a little bit of a lens or a perspective by which you can examine not only our environmental policies, but other policies as well. And if you're engaged in international affairs and politics, I think this will be some useful, I hope some useful points that you can use for looking at all of the events in the American system, because they certainly are going to have an impact because of our close relationship with the UK. And you can see I'm wearing my Scotland pin with Scotland as well. Particularly on environmental politics. In the U.S., it was very much a ground-up, what we call a grassroots type of movement. It started probably in the 50s, but in the 60s for sure. We had earlier folks who were concerned about environmental issues, John Muir, et cetera, and our conservation movement got started probably at the end of the 1800s, early 1900s, Yellowstone Park being established, et cetera. But the sort of the modern environmental movement in the U.S. got started, I would say, with folks like Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring. And it's very much this community, grassroots, local level concern that gradually assembled and coalesced and built into a real political force. U.S. EPA was started in 1971. I believe it was the first environmental ministry or department in the world, and is still, I think, a preeminent one. But when you look at environmental issues in the U.S., it's always important to look at those as the result of this coalescing of local concern and individual issues. With climate change, the sort of coalition building and opinion forming is such a new issue, and I think that's still a process that's very much underway. I mean, this was an issue even 5 or 10 years ago, was at a much lower level of public awareness. And so the development of the sort of traditional political positions, who supports what aspects of them, is still, I think, an active issue in the U.S. And as a result, you get some very interesting groupings coming out of this. The old saying that politics makes strange bedfellows. Well, I would say environment makes strange bedfellows as well. So it's still an issue that, because of its newness to the political scene, I think a lot of people are still working out their own individual positions, and as a result, the political scene is a little bit in, I wouldn't say turmoil, but let's say development. Because of this ground-up, sort of individual oriented development of policy, it takes a while to establish a political consensus in the U.S. But once that consensus is established, then we move forward very smartly from that point. And I think that you have seen that in the past on other environmental issues, and you're seeing it now, particularly with climate change, because I know that's an important issue. It's in everybody's front of everybody's discussions right now on environment. So once our consensus is established, then you move forward with real results, practical implementation, and we don't look back. There's usually no return to a prior policy. So the establishment of this consensus is something that really is happening now, I think, in climate change. Has, I think, really already taken place for environmental issues in general. The sort of the old discussion about, well, are we going to have economic development or are we going to have environmental protection? That discussion went out 20 years ago, and the discussion now is how are we going to have both. We need to have economic development and environmental protection, and what's the best way to do that. Another aspect of our political system, because of our openness, and I think it's much the same here in Scotland. I was at a discussion this morning with some government folks and academics, is the openness of our political system to input from a variety of sources. So government is not the sole actor in